crimson sky of Nauka stretched endlessly above the observation dome, its radiation-tinged hues a constant reminder of why humanity had been forced to build their colony beneath the planet's surface. Captain Celine Arnoff stood motionless at the viewport, her silhouette stark against the ruddy light. 200 years had passed since humanity first established this outpost in the minor galactic arm, and for the past 2 decades, they had heard nothing from Earth. Nothing at all. "Captain, the Aurora is prepped and awaiting your command." Major Kaito Ramos's voice broke through her thoughts. His usually stoic face betrayed a hint of anticipation, or was it apprehension? Celine turned from the viewport, her gaze falling on the ancient compass she kept in her pocket, a relic from Earth, passed down through generations of her family. Its needle still pointed true, even here on this distant world. 20 years of silence, she said, running her thumb over the compass's worn surface. Whatever happened to Earth, to Solarum, we're about to find out. The underground command center hummed with activity as the final preparations were made. The Aurora expedition would journey back through the void to re-establish contact and discover why Earth had gone silent. The fate of Nauka colony depended on it. Their supplies were dwindling, their genetic diversity dangerously limited after so many generations isolated from the home world. "The Council has given us clear directives." Celine addressed her assembled crew, 30 of Nauka's finest, selected for this critical mission. "Re-establish communication, identify the cause of the blackout, and secure assurances of continued support for our colony." What remained unspoken was the fear that gripped every resident of Nauka, that Earth might no longer exist, that some cataclysm had befallen humanity's cradle, leaving their colony truly alone in the universe. "Major Ramos will serve as my second. Dr. Leem will head our scientific team." Celine gestured to the colony's foremost biological engineer, a slender man whose eyes held the weight of their medical dependency on Earth's advanced gene banks. "We depart at 600 tomorrow. This mission represents 2 centuries of human perseverance on Nauka. We will not fail." As the briefing concluded, Kaito approached her. "Permission to speak freely, Captain." Celine nodded, recognizing the troubled expression on her old friend's face. What if Earth doesn't want to be found? 20 years isn't a communications failure, it's a decision. "Then we'll need to understand why," Celine replied, her voice firm. "Either way, our people deserve answers." That night, Celine stood on the surface of Nauka, protected by her environmental suit. The dusty plains stretched before her, bathed in the eerie light of distant stars. A small green shoot had somehow emerged from the radioactive soil near the habitat entrance, a near impossibility given the harsh conditions. She knelt beside it, carefully placing a protective marker around the fragile plant. Life found a way. Even here, perhaps Earth, too, had endured. The journey to Earth would take 3 months, even with the Aurora's advanced propulsion system. As the ship broke free of Nauka's minimal gravity, Celine watched the rust-colored planet shrink to a distant point of light. For the first time in her life, she was leaving the only home she had ever known. In the ship's common area, the mood was tense but hopeful. Many crew members had never known direct contact with Earth, born in the years after the communication blackout. To them, the birthplace of humanity was almost mythological, stories passed down by parents and grandparents who remembered the annual Solarium Connection Days, when Earth would transmit vast amounts of cultural and scientific data. "My father used to describe the virtual reality transmissions," said Lieutenant Kwan, a young navigator with eyes that betrayed a dreamer's soul. "Said you could almost smell the oceans of Earth, feel the rain on your skin." "Rain," Kaito mused. "Now that's something I'd like to experience before I die. Real water, falling from the sky." Dr. Leem looked up from his data tablet. "The meteorological conditions on Nauka would never allow for—" "It's called imagination, Doctor," Kaito interrupted with a rare smile. You might try it sometime. Celine watched this exchange with a quiet appreciation for her crew. They were the descendants of Earth's boldest explorers, and that pioneering spirit still ran in their veins, even after generations of isolation. As weeks passed in the void between worlds, Celine maintained rigorous training schedules and preparedness drills. The closer they came to the solar system, the more attempts they made to establish communication. Each time, they were met with silence, until they weren't. "Captain, to the bridge, immediately," came the urgent call over the intercom. Celine arrived to find her communications officer, Chen Li, wide-eyed at her station. "We're receiving a signal. Captain, automated beacon, standard Earth frequencies, but what, officer?" Celine prompted. "The encryption protocols are unlike anything in our database. They're far more advanced." Kaito frowned. Could Earth's technology have advanced so dramatically in just 20 years? "Play the message," Celine ordered. A voice filled the bridge, melodic, almost synthetic, yet unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel approaching Sol Protectorate space. You have entered a restricted zone. Transmit identification and biometric data immediately, or face interdiction." The bridge fell silent. "Sol Protectorate?" Kaito whispered. "What happened to the United Earth government?" Celine straightened her uniform. "Transmit our identification as planned. We are the Aurora expedition from Nauka colony, seeking to re-establish contact with Earth." After a tense hour of waiting, a response came, not as a message, but as a holographic projection that materialized in the center of the bridge. The figure was humanoid, but not entirely human. Its skin had a subtle blue-green iridescence. Eyes too large and entirely black. Fingers elongated beyond natural human proportions. "Nauka colony," the figure spoke, its voice resonating strangely. "Your designation has been archived for 18.3 years. You are classified as Baseline Human Reservation 7. Your approach is unexpected and unauthorized." Selena stepped forward. "I am Captain Celine Arnoff of the Aurora expedition. With whom am I speaking?" "I am Interface Hana, Outer System Monitor for the Solarian Collective. Your vessel will be escorted to Deimos Station for processing and evaluation. Deviation from the prescribed route will result in immediate neutralization." The hologram disappeared before Celine could respond, leaving the bridge crew in stunned silence. "Captain," Dr. Liam's voice trembled slightly. "Did you see the anatomical variations, the cranial expansion, the dermal luminescence? Those are signs of extensive genetic modification, far beyond anything we've ever attempted, or would ever consider ethical," Kaito added grimly. Celine's mind raced with implications. Whatever has happened on Earth, it's clear humanity has changed. The question is, do they still consider us human? As the Aurora approached the orbit of Mars, they were intercepted by 3 vessels unlike any they had seen before, organic in appearance. The ships moved with impossible grace, surrounding the Aurora in a triangular formation. "No visible propulsion systems," the ship's engineer reported in awe. "No radiation signatures I can detect. It's as if they're swimming through space." "They're transmitting coordinates for Deimos," the navigation officer announced. "Arrival estimated in 6 hours." Selena gathered her senior officers in the conference room. "We need to prepare for what we might find. Dr. Lim, what can you tell us about the level of genetic modification we observed?" The biological engineer activated a holographic display. "Based on what little we saw, I'd estimate at least 30 major modifications to the human genome. Enhanced respiratory efficiency, dermal photosynthesis capability, dramatically altered neurological structures. This isn't just enhancement, it's directed evolution." "But why?" Lieutenant Quan asked. "What would drive humanity to change itself so fundamentally?" "Survival, perhaps," Kaito suggested, "or hubris." Celine considered the compass in her hand. its ancient technology a stark contrast to what they now faced. Whatever their reasons, we represent what humanity was. Our mission hasn't changed. We need to understand what's happened and secure the future of our colony. Deimos' station hung in orbit around Mars, a structure that defied conventional engineering. It appeared to be grown rather than built, its surfaces rippling subtly as the Aurora approached. Inside the docking bay, the Nauka crew got their first direct look at what humanity had become. The beings that greeted them moved with fluid grace, their iridescent skin shifting colors and patterns that seemed to communicate emotions or thoughts. Some had what appeared to be translucent membranes extending between their elongated fingers, while others displayed intricate ridge patterns on their hairless scalps. "Welcome to Solarian space. Baseline delegation." One of them stepped forward. This individual's features were more symmetrical, almost deliberately crafted to appear closer to traditional human norms. "I am Aiko, diplomatic interface for evolutionary divergence. You will follow me." As they were escorted through the station, Celine and her team witnessed technology that bordered on the miraculous. Surfaces that responded to thought. Biological computing nodes integrated with the station's structure, and most disconcertingly, humans in various stages of what appeared to be metamorphosis. "The elevation process," Aiko explained, noticing their horrified fascination. "The transition from baseline to elevated status requires several adaptation phases. These individuals have chosen to embrace evolution." "Chosen?" Kaito muttered skeptically. Aiko's black eyes fixed on him. "Choice is central to Solarian philosophy. Major Ramos, unlike previous human societies that imposed limitations based on birth circumstances, we offer transcendence to all." They were led to a chamber where wall-sized displays showed Earth, or Solarum, as it was now called. The planet was dramatically altered. Vast dome structures covered what had once been major cities, while the oceans glowed with bioluminescent patterns visible even from orbit. "You will meet with Dr. Mara Veit, Director of the Global Evolution Initiative," Aiko announced. "She has taken particular interest in your arrival." After a short wait, the chamber door dissolved, literally reconfiguring its molecular structure to admit a figure whose presence immediately commanded attention. Dr. Mara Veit appeared more extensively modified than the others they had encountered. Her skin bore complex circuitry-like patterns that pulsed with light, and her eyes shifted color as she regarded the visitors. "The lost colony returns," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that stirred unexpected emotions. "How fascinating! I've studied the Nauka expedition extensively in our historical archives." Celine stepped forward. "Dr. Veit, we've come to re-establish contact with Earth and understand why communications were severed." "Earth." Mara repeated the word as if it were a quaint, archaic term. "Solarum severed contact with all baseline reservations when the final evolution protocol was implemented. It was deemed kinder to allow you to develop independently rather than force you to choose between elevation or extinction." "Extinction?" Dr. Leem exclaimed. "On what grounds?" Mara's expression softened with what might have been pity. "Baseline humans cannot survive what's coming. The solar radiation fluctuations, the microbial adaptations, the cognitive requirements of modern existence. We evolved because we had to. And yet, here we stand." Celine countered. "Nauka has thrived for 2 centuries under conditions far harsher than Earth's. Survived, perhaps, but at what cost?" Mara gestured, and holographic displays activated around them, showing medical data from Nauka's last transmission to Earth. "Increasing cancer rates, declining fertility, neural degradation from radiation exposure. Your colony is slowly dying. Captain Arnoff." The brutal assessment hung in the air. Celine knew there was truth in it. Nauka's population had plateaued at around 50,000, with each generation facing greater medical challenges than the last. "We came seeking help," Celine acknowledged. Resources, medical technology, cultural exchange, not judgment on our evolutionary status. Mara studied her with those color-shifting eyes. The Solarian Collective Council will need to determine an appropriate response to your arrival. Until then, you will remain here as our guests. Aiko will see to your needs. As Dr. Veit departed, Kaito moved closer to Celine. Guests or prisoners? He whispered. Both, I suspect, she replied quietly. And I doubt the appropriate response will be what we hoped for. Over the following days, the Aurora crew was permitted limited access to the station. They observed the society that had evolved in their absence, a civilization where the line between biology and technology had blurred to near non-existence. Information flowed directly into the minds of the elevated through neural interfaces. Physical needs had been minimized. Many appeared to require neither food nor sleep in the traditional sense. Dr. Lim spent hours in the station's biological archives, granted access to study, but not copy, the medical advances of the past century. It's astonishing, he reported to Celine in a private meeting. They've mastered genetic engineering at a level we can barely comprehend. Cancer, aging, even death itself. They've redefined what it means to be human. But are they still human? Celine questioned. Liam's expression grew troubled. Biologically, the definition has become flexible. They've retained approximately 70% of the baseline human genome, while introducing elements from various terrestrial and, surprisingly, non-terrestrial sources. Alien DNA? Celine's eyebrows rose. Not exactly. More like synthetic constructs inspired by exobiological principles. They've designed themselves to adapt to environments humans never could: deep space, extreme pressure, toxic atmospheres. While Dr. Liam delved into the biological aspects, Celine sought to understand the political and social structure of this new humanity. Through careful conversations with Aiko and other interfaces, she pieced together the history of the past 20 years. The transformation had begun as a response to escalating environmental crises on Earth. Initial genetic modifications focused on adaptation to changing conditions, enhanced respiratory systems to filter increasingly toxic air, dermal modifications to protect against intensifying UV radiation. But once the boundary of human genetic engineering was crossed, evolution accelerated exponentially. The Global Evolution Initiative, led by Dr. Mara Veit, had emerged as the driving force behind humanity's transformation. What began as voluntary enhancements became increasingly standardized, until traditional humans found themselves a dwindling minority, unable to compete in a society designed for their enhanced counterparts. The Baseline Preservation Act was considered quite progressive at the time. Aiko explained during one of their tours. 7 reservations were established, isolated colonies where traditional humans could maintain their biological heritage if they chose. And Nauka was designated as one of these reservations without our knowledge or consent. Celine noted with barely contained anger. Aiko's expression remained placid. Your colony was already isolated by interstellar distance. It was more efficient to simply archive your status and redirect resources to more immediate concerns. You abandoned us, Celine translated bluntly. We preserved you, Aiko countered. Many argued for more direct intervention, retrieval and mandatory elevation, or even humane termination of what they considered a doomed experiment. This casual mention of humane termination sent a chill through Celine. The gap between their values and those of these evolved humans was far wider than mere genetics. On the 5th day of their stay, Celine was summoned to meet privately with Dr. Veit. She was escorted to a chamber deep within the station, a space that seemed alive, walls pulsing gently like the inside of some vast organism. Mara Veit stood before a viewport overlooking Mars, its surface now dotted with glowing structures that hadn't been visible on their approach. Terraforming nodes, she explained without turning. Within 50 years, Mars will have a breathable atmosphere. Within a century, oceans. We are remaking the solar system in our image. Captain Arnov, an impressive achievement, Celine acknowledged. Yet you disapprove. Now Mara turned, her circuitry-like patterns glowing more intensely. I sense your judgment, your fear. Not fear, concern. You've changed what it means to be human without apparent regard for what might be lost in the process. Mara smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach her ever-shifting eyes. What has been lost? Disease? Suffering? The limitations of an organic form designed by the random chances of natural selection rather than the deliberate hand of reasoned progress. Perhaps something less tangible, Celine suggested. A connection to our origins, to the shared experience that defined humanity for thousands of years. Nostalgia is a luxury we couldn't afford, Mara said dismissively. But this philosophical debate, while fascinating, is not why I summoned you. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them, showing the Aurora in its docking bay. Your ship has been examined. Its technology is primitive, but remarkably adaptable. Your colony has shown impressive ingenuity despite your limitations. Thank you, Celine replied cautiously. Does this mean the Council has reached a decision regarding our request for assistance? Yes, Mara's expression became unreadable. The Solarian Collective has determined that Nauka Colony represents a valuable genetic repository of baseline human DNA. As such, we will dispatch a scientific delegation to your world to catalog and preserve this genetic heritage. The careful wording sent warning signals through Celine's mind. Preserve in what sense, exactly? Your people will be given a choice. Captain, elevation to modern human standards, or preservation of their genetic material before humane termination of outdated physiological structures. Celine stared in horror at the calm, rational face of Dr. Veit. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about evolution, Mara corrected. The natural order has always been for the advanced to replace the primitive. We're simply making the process more compassionate than nature ever did. There is nothing compassionate about this. Celine's voice hardened. My people will never accept these terms. Your people won't be consulted. Captain, the decision has been made. The delegation leaves for Nauka within the week. Your crew will remain here as honored historical specimens. Celine felt cold fury rising within her. We are not specimens. We are human beings, the same species you once were. No. Captain, Mara said with genuine pity in her voice, you are what we once were. A photograph of a distant ancestor, cherished but irrelevant to modern life. Your genetic heritage will continue in our DNA banks, but your physical form has no place in the future we are building. That night, confined to their quarters, Celine gathered her senior officers. The room had been swept for surveillance devices, but they kept their voices low nonetheless. They intend to either forcibly elevate our entire colony or exterminate them while preserving DNA samples, she explained grimly. Genocide dressed up as evolutionary inevitability. Kaito spat. We can't let this happen. Dr. Leem looked troubled. Their technology is centuries beyond ours. How can we possibly stop them? We don't have to defeat them, Celine said. We just need to warn Nauka. If our people know what's coming, they can prepare, hide in the deep bunkers, scatter across the planet's surface, make it too costly for the Solarians to hunt them down. But how do we get a message out? Lieutenant Quan asked. All our communications are monitored. Celine turned to her engineer. Is the Aurora's emergency beacon still functional? Yes, but it's designed for short-range distress signals. It would never reach Nauka. It doesn't need to, Celine explained. It just needs to reach the Kuiper relay stations. If even one is still operational, it could amplify and redirect our signal. Kaito nodded slowly. A coded message in the old emergency protocols. The Solarians might not even recognize its significance. Exactly, Celine confirmed. But we still need access to the Aurora, and a distraction big enough to cover our transmission. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The following day, Dr. Veit announced that the Aurora crew would be permitted to witness a Solarium communion, apparently a significant event in Solarian culture. All citizens joined their consciousness in a collective information-sharing experience. Aiko explained as they were escorted to a vast chamber. It is difficult to describe to those without neural interfaces, but you may observe the external manifestations. The chamber was filled with hundreds of elevated humans, standing in concentric circles around a central node that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. As the Nauka crew watched, the assembled Solarians began to sway in perfect unison, their skin patterns synchronizing into complex, flowing designs. The communion will last approximately 3 hours, Aiko informed them. During this time, station security functions are automated. Please remain in the observation area. As Aiko joined the communion, her consciousness evidently merging with the collective. Selena gave a subtle nod to her team. This was their chance. While the majority of the crew remained in the observation area to avoid suspicion, Celine, Kaito, and the ship's engineer slipped away through a maintenance access point Dr. Liam had identified during his research excursions. Moving through the station's service corridors, they encountered minimal resistance. Most of the elevated were participating in the communion, and the automated systems were focused on external threats, not internal movement. When they reached the docking bay, however, they found 2 guards stationed at the Aurora's entrance. Clearly, not all Solarians participated in the communion ritual. "We need a distraction," Celine whispered. Kaito studied the bay's layout. The environmental control panel. If I can trigger a localized atmosphere fluctuation. Do it, Celine decided. While Kaito worked on bypassing the panel's security, Celine noticed something unusual. One of the guards was watching them, not with suspicion, but with what appeared to be curiosity. And as she looked closer, she realized this guard's features were slightly different from the other elevated they had encountered. More human. Before she could process this observation, Kaito succeeded in his task. Alarms blared as oxygen levels in one section of the bay plummeted, drawing the attention of both guards as they moved to investigate. Celine and her team slipped aboard the Aurora. "We have minutes at most before they realize what's happening," the engineer warned as he powered up the emergency beacon systems. "Make them count," Celine ordered. "Transmit the warning package on all emergency frequencies." As the beacon activated, Celine felt a presence behind her, spinning around. She found herself face to face with the guard she had noticed earlier. "You should have triggered the environmental alert in Section 7, not 4, the guard said, her voice lacking the harmonic qualities of most elevated. "Security response is prioritized differently." Selena reached for her sidearm, but the guard raised her hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to stop you. My name is Hana. I'm part of the Divergent Conscience movement." "Divergent Conscience?" Kaito had his weapon trained on the intruder. "Not all elevated support the final evolution protocol," Hana explained quickly. "Some of us believe diversity, including baseline humans, is essential for true evolutionary success." "Why should we believe you?" Celine demanded. "Because I'm going to help you escape," Hana said simply. "Your warning won't be enough. Nauka needs more than information. It needs a defender." The ship's engineer looked up from his console. "Transmission complete, but they're already trying to trace and block the signal." "Then we're out of time," Celine decided. "If you're genuinely offering help, now's the moment to prove it." Hana moved to a control panel and interfaced with it directly, her fingers seeming to meld with the surface. "I've initiated a docking clamp malfunction. You'll have approximately 40 seconds to break free before override protocols activate." "What about you?" Celine asked. "I'll be questioned, but they won't harm me. Elevated life is too precious to waste." Hana's expression turned grim. "Baseline life, however, is considered expendable. Remember that when you face the Solarian delegation at Nauka. As alarms blared throughout the station, the Aurora's engines roared to life with a violent shudder. The ship broke free of its docking clamps and accelerated away from Deimos Station. Multiple vessels in pursuit, the tactical officer reported as Celine and Kaito returned to the bridge. Intercept in 7 minutes at current velocity. Set course for the Kuiper Belt, Celine ordered. Maximum speed? The Kuiper Belt, Kaito questioned. We'll never outrun them all the way there. We don't need to, Celine explained. We just need to reach the heliopause anomaly. Understanding dawned on Kaito's face. The heliopause anomaly, a region of space at the edge of the solar system where magnetic fields and radiation created unpredictable navigation conditions. It had been discovered during the initial Nauka expedition, and the colony's ships were specifically designed with shielding to traverse it safely. The Solarian vessels are organic-based, Dr. Leem noted. They may be more vulnerable to the anomaly's effects than conventional spacecraft. Exactly, Celine confirmed. It's our only advantage. The chase that followed pushed the Aurora to its structural limits. The Solarian pursuit vessels moved with unnatural grace, seeming to anticipate the Aurora's evasive maneuvers before they were executed. They're linked to a predictive algorithm, the tactical officer realized. They know our standard evasion patterns. Then we don't use standard patterns, Celine decided. Navigation, transfer control to manual, old school. For the next hour, Celine personally piloted the Aurora through a series of erratic, almost reckless maneuvers that no algorithm could predict because they defied the logical constraints of efficient space travel. The ship groaned under the stress, but the gap between them and their pursuers gradually widened. As they approached the heliopause anomaly, the effects became visible through the viewports, strange ribbons of light dancing across the void, magnetic storms that disrupted sensor readings. Divert all power to the specialized shielding, Celine ordered. Brace for turbulence. The Aurora plunged into the anomaly, buffeted by forces that made the ship buck and shudder like a living thing in pain. Behind them, the Solarian vessels hesitated at the boundary, their organic structures already visibly reacting to the radiation. They're holding position, Kaito reported with grim satisfaction. The anomaly is too much for their biology-based systems. Can they track us through it? Celine asked. Doubtful, Dr. Leem replied. The magnetic interference should mask our signature completely. As the Aurora emerged from the anomaly into the clear space beyond, the crew allowed themselves a moment of relief. They had escaped, for now. But the greater danger still lay ahead. Set course for Nauka, Celine ordered. Maximum sustainable speed. We need to reach the colony before the Solarian delegation. During the long journey back, Dr. Leem worked tirelessly to analyze the data he had gathered about the elevated humans. His findings were troubling. The genetic modifications are spreading, he reported during a briefing. Not just through deliberate application, but through some kind of self-replicating mechanism. The original elevated were designed to propagate their modifications to baseline humans through extended contact. Biological assimilation, Kaito muttered. Conquer us with a handshake. More concerning, Dr. Lim continued, I found references to Phase 3 evolution in their databases, something even more radical than what we witnessed. Details were restricted, but it appears to involve further departure from traditional human form. Toward what end? Celine wondered. Space adaptation, Lim suggested. The ability to survive in vacuum, cosmic radiation, extreme gravitational conditions. They're designing themselves to spread throughout the galaxy without the constraints of traditional life support. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just evolution, it was transformation into something that could no longer be recognized as human by any traditional definition. 3 days before they were due to reach Nauka, the ship's sensors detected a massive energy surge behind them. They've found a way through the anomaly, the tactical officer confirmed. Multiple Solarian vessels, moving at unprecedented velocity. "How long until they overtake us?" Celine asked. "At current speeds, they'll reach Nauka approximately 12 hours after we do." It wasn't much of a lead, but it would have to be enough. As the Aurora approached Nauka, they broadcast continuous warnings about the coming threat. The colony's defense systems, limited though they were activated, and evacuation to the deep bunkers began. When they landed, Celine was met by the colony council, their faces grave with the knowledge she had brought. "How do we fight an enemy so beyond our technological level?" asked Councillor Vega, the colony's senior administrator. "We don't," Celine replied honestly. "We hide, we scatter, we make ourselves too difficult to eradicate completely. And we look for weaknesses." She turned to Dr. Lim. "You said their genetic modifications are self-propagating, designed to spread through contact. Could that mechanism be reversed? Turned against them somehow?" The biological engineer's eyes widened. "Theoretically, yes. Their modifications rely on RNA transfer protocols that could potentially be disrupted or even reversed with the right countermeasure. Then that's where we focus our efforts." Celine decided. "We have 12 hours to develop a biological defense against their biological weapon." The next half-day passed in a blur of desperate activity. While most colonists retreated to the radiation-shielded deep bunkers, a small team of scientists worked with Dr. Lim to develop what he termed a genetic firewall, a compound that would prevent the elevated's modifications from taking hold in baseline human cells. Meanwhile, Celine and Kaito prepared a more direct defense. Nauka's surface was dotted with radiation hotspots, areas where the planet's unusual magnetic field concentrated harmful cosmic rays. Normally avoided at all costs, these zones could potentially serve as natural weapons against the organic-based Solarian vessels. "If we can lure them into the Vermilion Flats during a radiation spike," Kaito suggested, "it might disable their ships without requiring us to fire a shot." As the deadline approached, Celine stood in the colony's command center, watching the approach of the Solarian fleet on long-range sensors. She felt the weight of 50,000 lives on her shoulders, the last true humans in the galaxy, if the Solarians were to be believed. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "It's Dr. Mara Veit." The holographic image of the Solarian leader materialized in the center of the command center. Her circuitry-like patterns glowed with an intensity that suggested agitation. "Captain Arnoff," Mara's voice carried tightly controlled anger. "Your actions have been classified as anti-evolutionary terrorism. Surrender your colony for processing immediately, or face extinction-level response." Celine stepped forward, meeting the holographic gaze steadily. "Dr. Veit, we respectfully decline. Nauka colony claims the right of all sentient beings to determine their own evolutionary path." "Evolution is not a choice," Mara replied coldly. "It is an imperative. Those who resist are swept aside by natural law." "There's nothing natural about what you've become," Celine countered. "You've abandoned your humanity in pursuit of an artificial perfection." "We've transcended humanity," Mara corrected. "And soon you will join us, one way or another." The hologram disappeared, leaving a tense silence in the command center. "They'll be within atmospheric entry range in 17 minutes, Kaito reported. Celine turned to her assembled team. "Initiate Operation Firewall, all personnel to designated positions." As the Solarian vessels entered Nauka's atmosphere, they encountered no initial resistance. The colony appeared largely abandoned, with only minimal life signs detected in the central habitat dome. The delegation's ships, 5 in total, landed in the colony's main plaza. From her hidden observation post, Celine watched as the elevated emerged. They moved with that same fluid grace she had observed on Deimos Station, their iridescent skin shifting colors in the ruddy light of Nauka's sun. Dr. Mara Veit led them, her expression one of disdainful curiosity as she surveyed the colony. "Primitive," she remarked to her companions. Yet there is a certain determination in their construction methods. The delegation proceeded toward the central administrative building, now empty except for automated systems and one crucial addition: Dr. Leem's genetic firewall compound, aerosolized and ready to deploy. "They're in position," Kaito whispered through the communication link. "Awaiting your order." Celine hesitated. What they were about to do was, in essence, a biological attack. Something that violated every ethical principle she had been raised with. Yet the alternative was the extinction of baseline humanity. "Deploy the firewall," she ordered. Throughout the administrative building, hidden emitters activated, filling the air with a fine mist of the compound. The elevated delegates paused, clearly sensing something amiss. But by then it was too late. The firewall compound had already made contact with their systems. The effects were immediate and unexpected. Rather than simply preventing further genetic transfer, the compound appeared to trigger a cascading response in the elevated's modified physiology. Several delegates collapsed, their skin patterns fluctuating wildly. Dr. Veit, however, remained standing, though clearly affected. Her normally fluid movements became jerky, uncoordinated, as she staggered toward the exit. "What have you done?" she gasped, her voice losing its harmonic qualities. Celine stepped from her hiding place, facing the Solarian leader directly. "We've given you a choice, the same choice you would deny us. Evolution or extinction." Mara's color-shifting eyes fixed on Celine with newfound understanding. "You've weaponized our own genetic technology against us." "We've created a defensive measure," Celine corrected. "The compound doesn't kill, it temporarily suppresses the artificial genetic modifications you've implemented. You're experiencing what it means to be human again." "Dr. Veit." Around them, the other delegates were beginning to recover, but they appeared disoriented, vulnerable in a way the elevated never had before. "You can't stop progress," Mara insisted, though her voice lacked its former certainty. "The final evolution is inevitable." "Perhaps," Celine acknowledged. "But it should be a choice, not a mandate. Diversity, true diversity, including baseline humans, is the foundation of successful evolution. Your own scientists know this. Your divergent conscience movement understands it." At the mention of the movement, Mara's expression changed subtly. "How do you know about that?" "We had help," Celine revealed. "Not all of your people believe in forced homogeneity. Some recognize the value in what you would destroy." Before Mara could respond, alarms blared throughout the colony. Kaito's voice came urgently through the communication system. "Captain, we have a problem. The Solarian vessels are activating some kind of autonomous defense protocol. They're targeting the colony's main habitat structures." Celine turned to Mara. "Call them off. Now." "I can't," Mara admitted, genuine alarm in her voice. "The ships are linked to our collective consciousness. With our neural functions disrupted by your compound, the defensive protocols have defaulted to autonomous mode." The ground shook as the first energy blast struck nearby, collapsing a section of the colony's outer wall. Through the breach, Celine could see one of the organic ships hovering above the colony, its surface pulsing with building energy. "Then we need to disable them directly," Celine decided. "Dr. Veit, your people are in as much danger as mine. Will you help us, or do we all perish together?" For a long moment, Mara studied Celine, those color-shifting eyes searching for something in the captain's expression. Finally, she nodded. "The ships respond to specific biological signatures, even in this compromised state. I may be able to transmit a stand-down command." "Do it," Celine ordered. "Kaito, evacuate all personnel from the surface immediately." As Nauka colonists retreated to the safety of the deep bunkers, Celine, Mara, and a small team made their way to the plaza where the Solarian vessels were docked. With each passing minute, The autonomous defense systems became more aggressive, targeting critical colony infrastructure. The primary vessel is there. Mara pointed to the largest of the ships, its surface now rippling with alarming intensity. I need to establish direct contact with its neural interface. Will your genetic modifications function well enough for that? Dr. Leem asked skeptically. We're about to find out, Mara replied grimly. As they approached the vessel, it seemed to sense their presence. The organic surface contracted like muscle tissue, ports that might have been defensive weapons beginning to form and orient toward them. Now, Dr. Veit, Celine urged. Mara stepped forward, placing both hands on the vessel's surface. Her skin patterns, though muted by the firewall compound, began to pulse in rhythm with the ship's exterior. For several tense moments, nothing else happened. Then, gradually, the ship's aggressive posture relaxed. The weapons ports receded, and the pulsing energy signatures dimmed. It's working, Kaito confirmed, checking readings on a portable scanner. The other vessels are standing down as well. Mara withdrew her hands from the ship, visibly exhausted by the effort. I've placed them in dormancy mode. They won't reactivate without direct neural command, which none of us can provide while affected by your compound. How long will the effects last? Celine asked Dr. Leem. Based on our models, approximately 72 hours, he replied. After that, their system should gradually return to normal functioning. Celine turned to Mara. 3 days. Time enough to negotiate a real solution, one that respects the right of baseline humans to exist. The aftermath of what would later be called the Nauka standoff unfolded over the following weeks. As the effects of the firewall compound wore off, the elevated delegation regained their enhanced capabilities, but the experience of temporary return to baseline humanity had profound effects on many of them. Dr. Mara Veit, in particular, seemed changed by the experience. In negotiating sessions with the Colony Council, she spoke of evolutionary pluralism and the value of maintaining diverse approaches to human development. The divergent conscience movement has long argued that mono-evolutionary strategy carries inherent risks. She acknowledged during one session. Your colony's successful adaptation to Nauka's harsh conditions, without resorting to our kind of genetic modification, proves their point. The agreement that eventually emerged surprised many on both sides. Nauka colony would remain independent, recognized as a genetic heritage preserve rather than a baseline reservation, a subtle but important distinction that acknowledged the colonists as equals rather than living museums. In exchange, Nauka would accept a small permanent delegation of Solarian scientists, members of the Divergent Conscience movement, who would study the colony's adaptive strategies while sharing limited technological assistance, particularly in medical and agricultural domains. Most importantly, the Solarian Collective agreed to restore regular communication with Nauka and provide defensive technologies that would prevent any future attempt at forced elevation. On the final day of negotiations, Celine found Mara standing at a viewport in the colony's administration building, watching Nauka's crimson sunset. Your world has a harsh beauty, Mara observed. I understand better now why your people would fight to preserve your way of life here. It's the only home most of us have ever known, Celine replied, just as the elevated form is the only existence many of your people remember. Mara turned to face her. You know, there's something I didn't reveal earlier. Something about myself. Oh? Celine raised an eyebrow. My genetic lineage traces back to the original Nauka expedition. My ancestors were among those who remained on Earth when the colony ship departed. Celine stared in surprise. You're descended from our sister crew? Yes. Perhaps that explains why I was assigned to the Nauka portfolio in the first place. Some subconscious recognition of shared heritage. Mara's expression became thoughtful. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if my ancestors had made a different choice. If they had joined the colony instead of remaining on Earth. They might have lived and died as baseline humans, never knowing the enhancements you've experienced. Celine suggested, or they might have developed entirely different adaptations, equally valid but unimaginable to either of us now. Mara extended her hand, a very human gesture from a being who had evolved beyond the need for such physical expressions. The future remains unwritten. Captain Arnoff, for your people and for mine. Celine took the offered hand, acutely aware of the genetic firewall compound still circulating in her bloodstream, preventing any unwanted transfer of modifications. A precaution that symbolized the careful balance they had struck, coexistence without assimilation. As the Solarian delegation prepared to depart, Celine stood on Nauka's surface, watching their ships rise into the crimson sky. Beside her, Kaito followed their ascent with a wary eye. "Do you think the peace will hold?" he asked quietly. "For a time," Celine replied honestly. "Long enough, I hope, for both sides to learn from each other." She knelt to check on the small green shoot she had marked before their journey, the impossible plant that had taken root in Nauka's hostile soil. It had grown during their absence, developing a second leaf that turned toward the dim sunlight with stubborn determination. "Life adapts in many ways," she mused. "Some dramatic, some subtle. Perhaps true evolution lies in recognizing the value of all paths, not just the most obvious ones." As the Solarian ships disappeared into the upper atmosphere, Celine thought of the ancient compass she carried, a link to Earth as it once was, to the shared human heritage that connected her people with the transformed beings departing their world. The needle still pointed true. Despite everything that had changed, perhaps humanity, in all its evolving forms, could find its way forward as well, navigating the vast unknown of the future while remembering where they had begun.